Srila Prabhupada ki God bless this.
Who selected the topic for this evening?
So I was sharing the topics for UMD Pulmara. So Shalvi Mata, you wanted the same topic?
No, it's different. The language is different. That I received is different. Maybe you want the same thing. For the Maryland University program, I don't have the thing in front of me. For tonight, you want to say what you have in mind? Is there suffering in the perfect world? That was the question.
This one or the same one, like the Maryland?
I want to know, I want to speak about what you want. That's what I want. Is there suffering in a perfect world? The language is different for University of Maryland.
Yeah.
But that's what you want.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, no, and maybe.
For Maryland, is there danger in this perfect?
Is there danger? Yeah. But this is there suffering in this perfect world? Is there suffering or in the perfect world? Okay.
For Maryland.
It's different. Let's just stay with it's different. You don't edit right now. You tell me what you want tomorrow for tomorrow, but this is there suffering in a perfect world? Well, there's many things to say, but the bottom line is everything in the spiritual world is perfect, including perfect suffering. What? Could you say that again? Because suffering by material definitions of things, it's unwanted. So how can you have something unwanted in a perfect world? Or, if there's perfect suffering, are those that are in the spiritual world experiencing perfect suffering, experiencing perfection? And the answer is yes. So let's do this. There's many ways to approach this. The university student, this is a different audience than the university student audience, so I can do what I want to do with this group. I'd have to customize it for the college kids. I'm tempted to go to Nectar Devotion or Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu for this audience. I won't do that with the college audience. Does anybody here not know what the book that Prabhupada wrote, giving it the title Nectar of Devotion? Anybody here not know what that is? And because I can give a little background if you don't know what that is. Okay, thank you. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had a number of leading associates. One of those leading associates was Rupa Goswami. You've probably heard the 6 Goswamis, Rupa and Sanatan being foremost. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed Rupa Goswami extensively, like months, in the science of rasa or bhakti rasa, the mellows of loving service. Because when you serve a perfect person, Well, even you serve imperfect persons. People that serve find a happiness in service. There are some people, many people, they like. Their happiness is being in service to others. What to speak of if the service to others, if the other is the supreme other. That's bhakti service, bhakti seva. And there's a taste or an experience, subjective experience, rasa, that goes with that bhakti experience. After being thoroughly instructed, and not only instructed, but Lord Chaitanya empowered Rupa Goswami to two things: to understand everything. How'd you like that? Have a teacher that teaching you very elevated subjects, and they have a power to enable you to understand everything that they say and the highest truths. So that was a benediction given to Rupa Goswami because he was so qualified. And then the second was he empowered him, instructed him to write what he has understood. And so he did. Many writings. One of those many writings was a book on Bhakti Rasa, and he entitled the book Bhakti Rasa Amrita. Amrita means nectar. Sindhu. Sindhu means ocean. So in the ocean of the nectar of devotion. Or Prabhupada summarized it, made a summary study and called it Nectar Devotion. There's many things in that Nectar Devotion book or Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu writing. Many very elevated teachings. But one of the foundational teachings is there are 5 primary and 7 secondary rasas. We have 3 young men over here. You're one of the 3 in the green shirt. You don't look over your shoulder. You good at math? Here's a real easy one. 5 plus 7 equals? Okay, very good. So there's 12 rasas, 5 primary, 7 secondary. One of the 7 secondary rasas, in English it translates as sorrow. But it's perfect sorrow. Each one of the primary rasas and the 7 secondary rasas has a presiding deity. The presiding deity of sorrow is Lord Ramachandra. I don't know if you've had the experience of reading Ramayana, because, I was far more familiar with Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. And when I started reading Ramayana, I found this one word kept being repeated, at least in the translation that I was reading, is sorrow and sorrow and sorrow and sorrow. Starting with, the sorrow notion starts when Kaikeyi does what Kaikeyi does. And Dasarath is smashed. He can't even speak, but she brazenly says what he is unable to say. And the reader is taken down a path of sorrow. And Ram isn't feeling sorrow, but those that hear what he has to do are feeling sorrow. So he goes to his mother and she has her reaction. He goes to Sita, she has her reaction. He goes to Lakshman, he has his reaction. Bharat's out of town, so he doesn't get to react right then. And then he leaves. Puts on tree bark, and the word sorrow is there so many times. It's just like hit me with like a club. And then he leaves. And then Bharat comes to find out what happened. And what does he feel? It's in sorrow and lots of other emotions, but in that negative zone. But it's perfect sorrow. And the Lord of that perfect sorrow is Lord Ramachandra. Because this is now in Nectar Devotion or Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it's a type of ecstasy. Come again? How is sorrow a type of ecstasy, please? Because the center of that emotion is the supreme blissful person. Ramachandra is the personality of Godhead, and feelings in relation to the personality of Godhead are ecstatic. And one of them is the feeling of separation. No, separation is not fun, but it draws one's attention even more in the mood of separation than in the activities of meeting. Or meeting after a long separation is very special. It's a science of emotion, of transcendental emotion, where the cause of separation gives the feeling of sorrow. I mean, as I was going through and then learning Ramayana and speaking about Ramayana and so forth and so on, I met a young man who grew up in a part of India where when he came to visit the Potomac Temple, he told me he had to leave the temple room. Because when he saw the deities of Sita, Ram, Lakshman, Hanuman, it reminded him of his childhood of reading Ramayana. He couldn't even see the deity. He had to leave. Because he felt pain, the sorrow of what Ram had to endure, and all the churning of that emotion again and again and again and again. So then I showed him the passage from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He's the Lord of that emotion. He's presiding over that emotion so that it's a type of ecstasy because he can't be harmed, and Sita can't be harmed, although it looked like that was going to happen. And Lakshman was hit with twice and had to be rescued, and so there was that sorrow, but then he was rescued. It's just joy. That's one approach in response to the question, is there suffering in a perfect world? So this isn't a perfect world. And the suffering isn't perfect. The suffering is, but it's a reflection of this whole material. Chapter 15 Bhagavad Gita is the description of the banyan tree, chapter 15. Banyan tree where the branches are growing down and the roots are growing up, and there's no such tree. Other than in reflection. There's the branches are growing down in the reflection, and the roots are growing up in the reflection. But the tree is right side up, not upside down. This material world is an upside down world, where this is a reflection of the real world. And so back to the question, a detail. Back to the question, is there suffering in a perfect world? Yes. Perfect suffering. And this is a reflection of the perfect world. And so the suffering here isn't perfect. Suffering is a reflection of what real suffering is in ecstasy. That's a contradiction, by the way. Real suffering is in ecstasy. Real suffering is in ecstasy because it intensifies the feelings from the subject to the object of love. That which intensifies the feelings of love between the subject and object of love is ecstasy. So feelings of separation, or feelings of misfortune, or feelings of that nature, feelings of sorrow, sadness. It's an ecstasy. Then comes this nice word, lila. It's a pastime. One of the pastimes I like, there's many I like. One of the pastimes I like is when the seventh child of Devaki is in the womb of Devaki, and Krishna has not yet appeared, but Krishna summons his Yogamaya potency. And so Yogamaya just wants to do some service. Yes, what's service? There's a very difficult service. I want you to do 3 things. What's that? Anything. In the womb of Devaki is the 7th son. He is Balaram. Balaram, he's very heavy, but you can do it because I'll give you the strength to do it. Transfer Balaram from the womb of Devaki to the womb of Rohini. Got it? Got it. Next, you take birth in the womb of Yashoda. No problem. Take birth in the womb of Yashoda. And third, I'm going to appear as the 8th son of Devaki. When I appear in the prison house of Kamsa as the 8th son of Devaki, my mother and father are going to arrange for me to be transferred from the prison to the side of Yashoda. And they're going to be a little switcheroo. I'll be placed by the side of Yashoda, and you're going to be brought back here to the prison house of Kamsa. And Kamsa's going to come and try to kill you. But don't worry. You're my spiritual potency. He can't kill you. And after he tries to kill you, the next service is you can spread yourself throughout the land in your various expansions under the name of Durga, etc., etc. And that's another service for you. Yes, sir. Now, there's a lot of emotion connected with this, and some of it is, unpleasant emotion, where he's setting her up to be killed. But she can't be killed. So, is it like that? Is that cruel, or what is it? So, this material world, back to chapter 15 Bhagavad Gita, is a reflection of the spiritual world. In the spiritual, everything that exists in the reflection has to be there in the object that's casting the reflection. There has to be sorrow. There has to be everything. But it's in this world, it's all distorted and imperfect and illusory and insubstantial. Now you see it, now you don't. And there's no substance even when you see it, although it looks like there's substance. And one tries to become the enjoyer of that which is insubstantial. Boo, big mistake. And we keep doing it. And keep doing it. And feel sorrow. And all kinds of other things that we feel. The joy is also not joy. It's a reflection. Everything here is a reflection. And it looks just like reality, but it's not. Getting some special seats for the senior citizens that come. I brought with me, I think I'll be able to access it. This, it's not only in our tradition. There's this is a different audience. Maybe I can do this for tomorrow's audience. Saint Francis of Assisi, you've heard his name? Those of you from India, there are a few people here from India. You've heard of Saint Francis? Some have heard of Saint Francis. Some are looking at me like, what planet are you from? Saint Francis of Assisi is a celebrated monk or renunciate, and he has many teachings, the teachings of Saint Francis. He's a saint. And there's a very nice passage I'm going to read to you, where Saint Francis, as a monk, was traveling here and there with an associate named Leo. And Leo kind of wrote a biography about his dealings with Saint Francis. I'm going to read to you. The title of this is A Perfect Joy. Perfect joy. But when you hear it, it sounds like perfect sorrow. So this is because his consciousness is so much fixed in the Supreme, different tradition, obviously, but his consciousness is fixed. As they walked, Francis kept describing places where perfect joy would not be found. Finally, after several miles, Brother Leo said, I pray, teach me, wherein is perfect joy? So he's now going to give a perfect joy description. If, when we arrive at our destination, all drenched with rain and trembling with cold, all covered with mud and exhausted from hunger, if when we knock on the convent gate, the porter should come angrily and ask, who are we? And after we tell him, he will say, what you say is a lie. You are two impostors going about deceiving the world and taking alms from the poor. Begone. If then he refuses to open the gate and leaves us outside, exposed to the snow and rain, suffering from cold and hunger, until nightfall, then, if we accept such injustice, such cruelty and contempt with patience, without being ruffled, and without murmuring, believing in humility and charity that the porter really knows us, and that it is God who makes him speak in this way, write it down, Brother Leo. That is perfect joy. Francis wouldn't leave it alone, adding further, and if we knock again, and the porter comes out in anger to drive us away with oaths and blows, as if we were vile impostors, saying, begone, miserable robbers, for you shall not eat or sleep here at all. If we accept it with patience, with joy, and with charity, oh brother, Leo, write it down. This indeed is perfect joy. It goes on. He was, then they go somewhere else, they come back, and the same thing happens again. And it's just like has this, just accepting that this is Saint Francis, not in the spiritual world. This is a reflection, but being connected in consciousness with the personality of Godhead, who may be doing whatever he's doing to test our determination and patience and our confidence, and ultimately in being under his shelter, etc., etc. Then that's joy. The joy is the joy of consciousness. It's not the joy of the circumstance necessarily. Now, we can start going a little bit higher and say, like the sorrow. Dasarath lost his life out of the feelings of separation from his son, that he had to keep his word. He kept his word above his life. He gave up his life in feelings of separation from Ram, etc., etc. And then there's the residents of Vrindavan. When Krishna left Vrindavan, similar, when Ramchandra left Ayodhya. It's a rerun. It's just a different set of devotees. And the kind of feeling, the intense feelings of love of the residents of Ayodhya for Ram, seeing him get on that chariot with Sumandra and trying to hold the chariot and this and that. And then going to him sometime later with Bharata, and he won't come back. Such a touching scene when Kaikeyi, having realized what she has done, but it was too late, she was in the entourage that went to Chitrakoot. At least in one version of Ramayana, she has a conversation with Ram and cries. And he just consoles her. Meaning it was meant to be. He's not disturbed. The sorrow is not with him. Although we may feel, or the residents of Ayodhya certainly felt sorrow in separation from Ram. And same when Krishna left to go to Mathura. And so many, and then he didn't come back and he didn't come back. And why didn't he come back? Why didn't he come back? He knew what they were feeling. He was feeling what they were feeling. But he didn't come back. Why didn't he come back? As described by our acharyas, externally at least, he didn't come back because he knew that if he demonstrated his affection for the residents of Vrindavan, the residents of Vrindavan would be harassed. The demons that were still remaining on earth would go and harass the Brijbasis or cause them harm in some way. So he didn't go back. And finally, it's not in the Bhagavatam, but it's described elsewhere. When the last Dantavakra demon was killed, he then went back. Did you know that? Krishna went back. He spent 2 months with the residents of Vrindavan, fulfilling and satisfying all their desires, because now it was safe, because all the demons were killed. And then he informed them that I'm going to conclude my pastimes. So anyway, the churning of emotion amongst the residents of Vrindavan, because their affinity and attachment for Krishna was unsurpassed by any of the other forms of the Lord having pastimes. The exclusive and intimate association that Krishna provided was the platform for perfect sadness, the sadness of separation, and then again meeting. There's a very nice description, just sharing a nice description. The gopis, in the pastimes of Krishna, when they were very young, the gopis went during the coldest month of the year, January, February, performing a certain austerity in the early morning hours, taking bath and worshipping goddess Katyayani, requesting Katyayani that they wanted Krishna as their husband. You know that pastime. So Krishna came and he took their garments, and he did naughty things. Young boys and young girls don't do those things, but he did those things. And he promised them, I will marry you. So Rupa Goswami, in his inimitable style, explains they actually did marry Krishna. Because some of you know, many of you know, most of you probably know, there was a situation where there was a king who kidnapped 16,100 princesses. Who was that? Narakasura. Narakasura. So Krishna came and rescued them because they requested. Krishna came and rescued them. According to Rupa Goswami, they weren't princesses. They were gopis from Vrindavan, and he just made up the story that they were princesses, and Krishna married them. Krishna married them. Those 16,108 princesses were young girls that Krishna had promised he would marry them, and married them. You can read in Rupa Goswami's Lalita Madhava and Vidagdha Madhava. It's pretty amazing. He's not a fiction writer. It's not Harry Potter or something like that. It's his realization, and based upon certain statements in Scripture, that's what happened. So they all became his queen, along with the other 8. So sorrow is perfect sorrow. And the intensity of love intensifies the feelings of love, of meeting and separation. But even in separation, this is one of the teachings of Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. When those feelings of separation are there, it intensifies the feelings of love. And it's true. It's true. That the common English saying, maybe you've heard this before, I don't know, something's probably comparable in India, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Have you heard that one? You've heard it. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Feelings of separation don't feel good. It increases the intensification or absorption in the object of love. And so within the realm of the perfect world, because for those of you who came a little bit late, is there suffering or is there sadness in a perfect world? There's perfect sadness, perfect suffering. Not this kind. That kind. That intensifies feelings of love. Where the object of love is a perfect person. Because that's the spiritual world. Everything is centered around the perfect person. And it's Ayodhya, it's Ram. And in Krishna Loka, it's Krishna. And everybody and everything, not just the people, but the birds and the rivers and the trees and the creepers and everything, have that experience of intense feelings. And there's different seasons. I'll just go a little bit into this, then we'll see if there's some discussion. I don't know if I'm touching on the topic you wanted me to touch on, but Bhakti Vinod, do you recall reading Light of the Bhagavat? You probably have a copy in your bookshelf. I invite you to read it after hearing a little bit of description. I'm going to be giving a 13-part seminar on that little book over the Thanksgiving weekend in Houston, Texas. Because I started getting into the book because of going to China. I visit China, and when I found out that Prabhupada wrote the book for the mindset of people from the Far East, I took interest. I knew that it was strategic to write the book the way that he wrote the book and have the artwork done the way that he designed the artwork to be done. So I found all about the background and then learned about the book. And the book, just a little quickly, 1962, Prabhupada was living at the Vangshi Gopal Temple. Where's that? It's a little place near Keshigat in Vrindavan. So let's go to Vrindavan for a little bit, next 5-7 minutes. Keshigat is a nice place in Vrindavan, and there's as we know, Prabhupada writes that there's 5,000 temples in Vrindavan. And one of those 5,000 is the Vangshi Gopal Temple. Vangshi Gopal Temple is a home. And as is the culture, persons that have means, in their home they establish a deity of Krishna. And it's the ground floor and there's upper floors. That's the deity's home. The home is their temple. The temple is Krishna's home, and their home is Krishna's home. So Prabhupada rented a room in that place, up on one of the upper floors, had to go up 18 steps, little tiny room, blah, blah, blah. So during that period of time, he was going back and forth between Vrindavan, which he was making as his headquarters, and Delhi, because he was A and B. He was writing his Back to Godhead magazine, and B, going to Delhi to find people who would help sponsor, like his writing, become subscribers to Back to Godhead magazine, and eventually looking for people who would assist him in making passage to America, because that was his instruction from Bhaktisiddhanta. So he would go to Delhi, here and there, and do book distribution, Back to Godhead magazine. So in the course of his visits in Delhi, one man gave him a flyer that he had received, and the flyer was advertising an event that was being planned. This was in January, February, an event that was being planned in May of 1962 in Tokyo. The event was being called something very interesting. Let's see if I can remember. Cultivation of the human spirit. What does that mean? It can mean anything. Prabhupada was interested. He wrote to the organizer. The organizer wrote back a nice letter that was essentially a letter that could get him a visa and a passport, because he didn't have either. So Prabhupada had a vision that said, people in this is Tokyo. Bhaktisiddhanta said, go to the English-speaking, but he also means outside of India. This is a nice opportunity, let me go. So he wrote a book. But he was contemplating, the audience in the Far East have a tendency, which is true, to understand lessons of life through scenes of nature. It's part of the culture. So he selected Canto 10, Chapter 20, which is the descriptions of scenes of nature. Chapter 19 is the summer season, and what comes after the summer season is the rainy season. So it's the rainy season, then the autumn season. And he wrote a book that tells the whole Srimad Bhagavatam from scenes of nature. to captivate the hearts and the minds of the particular audience that he was going to be addressing. That was an international event, cultivation of the human spirit. But, certainly he expected there would be a lot of Far Eastern minds that would be there, and it would capture their mind, and he could give the message of the Bhagavatam to those people. It's awesome. You've seen how skinny the book is. So he encaptured the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam in that little book, 1962. Brilliant, masterful, charming. And he planned there would be 48 illustrations. He asked the organizer of the event if he could arrange for an artist with a Far Eastern art style to make the paintings, and gave 48 painting descriptions of what he wanted. That organizer didn't do it. Prabhupada didn't have the money to get on an airplane to go to Tokyo, so he didn't go. And 30 years later, the manuscript was found in a trunk with the description of the paintings and the book. And when the book was found, they gave it to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, who was then GBC in Hong Kong, and he arranged for the printing of the book in Chinese. And then it was translated to so many languages and published in Portuguese and Spanish and German and this and that. And most people have a copy that sits on the bookshelf. But if you open the book, not just look at the art, because the art is fantastic, but our masterful founder Acharya found a way into the hearts of people and turned the hearts of people in such a way that the coverings were shaken or removed, at least to some degree for some persons, and the dormant Krishna consciousness was awakened. Now, when you go from some place that you're familiar with to some place you're not familiar with, there's some discomfort. Become a sannyasi, find out what it's like. In the morning when I wake up, I have to figure out, where am I? Oh yeah, this is where I am. And then the next. So, but it's when you're rooted in that which is eternal. This is the topic for those who came a little bit late. Is there suffering in a perfect world? And the answer is, there's perfect everything in the perfect world. Otherwise, you wouldn't get the reflection over here. But it's perfect suffering, and the perfect suffering has dimensions that are not imperfect. Because the essence of the dimension is attachment to the Supreme. So that which enhances your attachment to the source of all happiness and the source of all joy, that's perfect suffering. Because with love, then sometimes there's separation. There's meeting and there's separation. Vipralamba sambhoga, separation, meeting. Emotion are churned by those. And it looks like when there's separation, there's sorrow or sadness. But it's perfect sadness, because it increases attachment. And our founder Acharya, I can't help but express some words of glorification of our founder Acharya. He found ways into the hearts, into the minds of so many different audiences in so many different circumstances of life, and churned the topics of attachment to the Supreme in a world that's filled with darkness. Amazing. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakshura Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So we offer our obeisances to Shri Guru, Srila Prabhupada especially, who had a gift of bringing that light into the realm of darkness, and even where it looked like it's something sorrowful, it's joy. He helped us understand when it's on the spiritual side, then it's perfect joy. That perfect sorrow is perfect joy. Now, I'll need your help, Mahamantra, to get the language of what the topic is going to be tomorrow. A little different than this. So this is for this audience, and something similar but different will be tomorrow at the university. So let's see if there's some discussion. You have a nice big space here in this home. You got a lot of friends. Yes.
One of the suffering, Maharaj, that is perfect suffering.
Perfect suffering is a contradiction, right?
Is the separation from Krishna. So how can we, because we are feeling Krishna in many ways, but again, like gopis, he is not in front of us. So how can we get that longing and suffering that Mahaprabhu felt towards
the process of devotional service, beginning with the means of purification. So the obstacle is the coverings of the soul, misconceptions of who we are, coverings of the soul. So how do you remove the coverings of the soul? What's the method? And as you go down that path of the method of Cheto Darpana Marjanam, so the process of Sankirtan is such a process, or japa, or calling names. Were you at the Potomac Temple on Sunday? So that was my intention. Just taking one of the names, Janardana, and massaging the topic of one of those names. And there's many more because we didn't have time, but meanings. But when you take the name of the Lord and hear the name, meditate, look at, experience, feel from different angles, reality comes to the foreground, and coverings of reality become dissipated, just like turning on a dimmer switch. You turn it on, and boop, 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 boop. As light becomes brighter, the darkness is dispelled. It's not a separate thing needed, just the light becomes brighter, the darkness is dispelled. So the material suffering is dispelled by connection with the Supreme. And as you become connected with the Supreme, then there's feelings that are already there, just dormant, in relation to the Supreme. And when those feelings, this is responsive to your question, those feelings become revived, awakened, then there's anticipation of meeting. And that's maybe a negative kind of emotion. Kabe Habe Bolo Seidin Amar, when will that day come when, in the process of approaching the Supreme, there's anticipation. And that's purifying. As a feeling of separation is purifying, even in the approach. And then, so your question was how to get to that stage. The process of bhakti itself. Cleansing and awakening, two things. Because the dormant consciousness is dormant, it's there. not only feelings for Krishna are there, love for Krishna is there, it's just dormant, covered over with so much stuff. And although conceptually we can say yes, practically speaking, we're saying no, or maybe, or there's strong affinity for the temporary. That's the inhibitor. And it's not like the solution is throw the temporary away. It's to see the temporary in relation to the source where the temporary comes from. There's a reflection, and there's the object casting the reflection. Let me see the reflection in relation to the object that's casting the reflection. Let me engage stuff in service to Krishna. Don't trash it. Engage in service to Krishna. Just like he has a nice ability to sing. So lots of people have ability to sing, and they do something else with it besides that which is going to enhance their attraction for Krishna. Bhaktivinoda has been playing drum for, 55 years? 58 years? 60 years? 51. So some people have rhythm. He's got rhythm. And some people use the rhythm for other things. But you don't trash things. We use them in such a way that it can be connected to Krishna's service. So it's a response to your how-to question, how to develop those feelings. That which we have affinity for today, see how that affinity can be transferred to the real object, of which this is just a reflection. Find the ways to connect that which is in the reflection to the reality. And in the association devotees, and by following the regulations of sadhana bhakti and cleansing and awakening. You knew the answer, you just wanted me to say it.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay. Anyone else?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for the class today, Guru Maharaj. I wanted to ask that, this world is definitely not perfect since it is a reflection of the spiritual world. Everything here may start with happiness, but it leads to
Something
sorrow.
else. Yeah.
And in opposite way, in spiritual world, everything leads to happiness, even sorrow, as you explained, Guru Maharaj. But in day-to-day life here, we see so much suffering going on, especially the war, so many people losing lives.
Yes.
Immature, death of friends and family. Guru Maharaj, in those situations, how do we still, encourage them to keep their faith in God, to keep their faith in Krishna? And
Well, it depends on the person. And depending upon the person, then you have some idea which door to go through. Sometimes it's just comforting. You don't have to go through this alone. It's just comforting. And sometimes it's when the time is right and the circumstance is right and the relationship is right, you can remind them of what they've forgotten. The eternality of the soul, the temporality of the reflection. And this, depending upon the person and the relationship with the person, you can point them in the direction of light. Depends. But certainly guideposts are from Bhagavad Gita. So as you become connected to Krishna's words in Bhagavad Gita, then you'll also get Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam Yena Mamupiyanti Te, how you can direct yourself and then in turn direct others back home to the place where things are eternal and full of joy, naturally. If you're, so it's more by your achar than your prachar. It's more by the character that you're carrying than the words that you say that can help people in a time of distress. But the end is, as you engage with those individuals, point in the direction of the eternal, because that's who we are. When we forget who we are, look at the temporary, there's darkness, or it's not joyful. Although it may initially appear to be joyful, wait a while. Something happens. So contemplate in your dealings with such persons who are going through those circumstances, how based upon them and you and your relationship with them and their nature, you can direct their attention towards that which is eternal. And away from that which is temporary. The attachment and affinity for the temporary, it brings the misery. Forgetfulness of the eternal as a result.
Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to you.
Is the microphone on? Yes, okay, good.
So, Guru Maharaj, what I have felt in my own life is that my heart wasn't going to be cleansed without my suffering. When I suffered, I realized the pain of others. And so I feel like I stumbled on this path. I was wandering in the material world, but I stumbled on the path of Krishna consciousness. And you know, Mahamantra Das has really helped me revive my relationship with Krishna. But I wouldn't have started on the path of purity if I didn't suffer. My heart had to break in order to open myself up for Krishna.
It's a response to your statement is there are 4 types of people who render devotional service unto Krishna, and you just described one of the 4. And there's 3 others. Categories, and then there's subdivisions of those categories. So, that's your experience, and it doesn't negate your experience because it was your experience. And then there's a bigger picture that it's not like that for everyone. It doesn't have to be like one thing for everyone. Some people, in other words, some people suffer and the light doesn't go on. Some people don't suffer and the light goes on. And so the key thing, besides the autobiography of what happened before, well, the key thing is association. Krishna sends a messenger who taps you on the shoulder and says, Haribo, check this out. Here's some light. Here's some joy. Different experiences is all I'm saying here. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, you got the microphone too. He's okay. Just have a seat.
You spoke about
We're good. Go ahead.
Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam. So what does Krishna say about his interference in karma, in individuals' karma? So when he has got the power to say make certain changes to the buddhi itself, he can transform the buddhi yoga altogether. Is it like, I heard somewhere, he has no interference in anybody's decisions and karma, but then he himself says that Dadami buddhi yogam tam. So is there a threshold or a limit or certain circumstances where he would come and manipulate somebody's ability to take decisions, right or wrong? And
if I've understood your question correctly, the answer is no. So I may not have understood your question correctly. The nature of a relationship with Krishna is it's fluid and it's dynamic. And that is to say, Krishna is all-knowing. He doesn't impose himself. He doesn't interfere. There's like this threshold language. He's just reciprocating. Another, Yayatam mam prapadyante. As they surrender unto me, tam sadaiva bhajam yaham. I reciprocate. It's a loving relationship where he doesn't impose, and there's not like a bell rings and now he'll give you booty. It's dynamic and very fluid. And so it all depends on our orientation, our heart's orientation, or consciousness orientation towards a relationship with a loving person. He's ready, but he doesn't interfere. And he encourages, but he doesn't interfere. He'll send messages and messengers and tap us on the shoulder, give us a little difficulty, maybe, and say, here I am, ready. So, it's dynamic. It's not mechanical. Someone else? Nandimukhi, there's something online. It's online, up front. I think this will be our last one, and we'll have another kirtan at the end. Joyful, because some people missed.
Sharing one. Back in 2018, when I celebrated Ram Navami for the first time and hardly knew anything about Rama, it was a Sunday. I went to the DC temple with Mahamandra Prabhu and Sandini Mataji. On our way to the temple, I told them that the name Rama sounded different to me. By the sound vibration of Rama, I saw a feeling of longing for someone, missing someone deeply. Later that year, around Dasara, I read Ramayana for the first time, book by Krishnadharma Prabhu. After finishing the book, I simultaneously wanted to read it again and could not bear to read it again. She wants to, but she doesn't want to.
Yeah, there's the sorrow part.
Yeah, because the personalities and their characters in Ramayana are so attractive, but the sorrow flowing from the text are heart-wrenching. Sharing two, I feel that the sorrows experienced by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Krishna and Rama have very different flavors.
Yes.
And question. Everything in the spiritual world is a person. For example, we heard about raining season personified in the light of the Bhagavata.
Yes.
So in this regard, who is the sorrow personified?
Well, the presiding deity is Lord Ramachandra, and he has many expansions and servants and so forth. And one can say that that's the personification, is Lord Ramachandra and his expansions and his devotees. Now, is there a personality of sorrow? I don't know anything about that. It's just that he's the Lord of sorrow. Nice question. You got something?
There's in the for example, the Garuda Purana describes the hellish worlds. As a conversation between Garuda and Vishnu. Similarly, in of course, the Bhagavatam describes it also.
Yes.
I recall reading, I can't remember whether it was the Garuda Purana, but for example, it mentioned the son of Yamaraj. Now, this is not describing any ecstasy in the spiritual realm on our topic, but it's basically related to the mundane aspect of suffering, which is because I'm prefacing it with the Garuda Purana, which means that you can. It's not going to be any real ecstasy. It's going to be actual suffering.
Yeah, it's the opposite.
So there's a description of the courtyard of Yamaraj, where there is the son of Yamaraj is there, and it's described that he resembles death. And standing right next to him is death, actual death. And then it even goes to some degree to explain that death is a person, but he's got a family. And I said, "What? This is just too much. My head couldn't handle it." And death's wife is a certain Sanskrit name, but I can't remember it exactly. But basically, she is the personality of misery. And they have a daughter who is fever. So it's just like
bad stuff.
This is, in other words, we're talking about the Bhagavatam and Goloka Vrindavan, but it's on the opposite side. There are personalities who are servants of Krishna also, but they are actually representing serious misery to your life.
So you're answering Nandi Mukhi's question. Let's have kirtan. After that, let's have kirtan. You have something.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you for your wonderful discussion. And I wanted to say that, your description of how the suffering, there's perfect suffering and this perfect suffering that we see in the spiritual world and the suffering we see here is a reflection of that perfect suffering.
Yes.
It's very nice. It's very kind of reassuring. And I take shelter of that. It's very nice.
I'm waiting for the but.
Also, I wonder if there was some kind of danger or there's some risk in taking shelter of that, in that it disconnects me from identifying or really feeling the suffering that people are experiencing, because it's a reflection of the suffering they're having is a reflection of what's happening in the spiritual world, and it can separate me from actually feeling what they're feeling, or really deeply identify with what they're feeling and being moved by that.
Well,
to act compassionately.
Is there risk or danger? And the answer is yes. However, The real suffering is forgetfulness of Krishna. So while not cutting yourself off from feeling compassion for those that are suffering, go deeper at what's behind that suffering. It's the suffering of the primordial suffering of forgetfulness of Krishna. Now, the perfect suffering is feeling separation due to attachment for Krishna. And the reflection has so many layers. But the root of that suffering is forgetfulness of Krishna. Here's another way of saying the same thing. Another way of saying the same thing. You know, apologies in one sense, but because of my visits to China, I've had to become, or I've become a little acquainted with the concepts of Buddhism and how much that has sunk into the culture of China, or the people of China. So most of you in the room will know, according to Buddha's teaching, the root cause of suffering is desire. If you want to become free from suffering, become free from desire. To get free from desire, how do you do that? Two things. Just disconnect. Detach yourself. Live a life of goodness. That's one. Compassion, charity, nonviolence, life of compassion. And become absorbed, essentially become absorbed in nothingness. So to get absorbed in nothingness, it's meditation. Meditation on what? Nothing. And nothingness. And you know, Shankara has a way, you meditate on somethingness to get to nothingness. But you know, they just go straight. And how do you get there? Be in the moment. I'm just sharing with you. There's a teaching there are different brands of Buddhism, but a strain that's through many of those brands of Buddhism is called Kshanik Vijnana Vad. Vada means doctrine. Vijnana, and their terminology is consciousness. The consciousness is momentary. Kshanik, you can find it in Canto 3, Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a measure of time that's less than the blink of an eye. So what's real, what is consciousness, is the moment. So the process of meditation involves becoming really absorbed in being in the moment, 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 until you're so much in the moment. You ready for this? You go on the other side of the moment. What's on the other side of the moment? Nothing. Void, or nirvana. The Sanskrit phrase is nirvana. What's nirvana? Not this. What's not this? It's nirvana. It's the state of nothingness, or void, or the state of bliss, the state of enlightenment. So let's go back. And when you get there, you've ended desire. You've squelched it. It just went out of existence because it only exists in the moment. And you just learned how to go beyond the moment into the place of enlightenment or nirvana. Cessation of material existence leaves you where? Nirvana. That's if you're a Buddhist. So we don't say negate. We don't say negate. Go back to your question. What's the root cause of suffering? This is the Vedic picture. The root cause of suffering is ignorance. The root of ignorance is ignoring our relationship with Krishna. That's where real suffering comes from. The root of suffering is ignorance. And the panacea, the cure for ignorance, is knowledge. Knowledge of what? And then, knowledge of the source of everything. So become free from ignorance, and you become free from suffering, because ignorance leads to ignorant desire, leads to ignorant activity, leads to suffering. Domino effect. Cause effect, cause effect, cause effect. Remove ignorance. So, removal of ignorance doesn't remove the finer sentiments of life. But when you see another's suffering, what's behind it? Ignoring Krishna. That's the root. So I care. Look at what Prabhupada did. He gave everything, his last breath, to help people become... He knew people were suffering, but he knew what was behind that suffering. The root cause is forgetfulness of our relationship with Krishna. So he wanted to revive. He cared. Phew. So what should we do? We don't become indifferent to others' suffering. We understand what's the cause of it and try to do as much as we can. And we're little people. What can we do? The suffering of the world is big. But do what we can do. Yesterday at the Potomac Temple, Gauravani, he asked a nice question. He said, I don't know if this is appropriate circumstance, but this war that's going on, this and that, and it could become a whole Middle East war, and then it can become a world war. And, how do we handle our emotions and deal with all that stuff? And it's the same answer. You got to do something. So do that which is going to bring a solution, permanent solution. So knowledge that removes ignorance, who we are, who I am, and live it. And then the holy name, because that's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's formula. We do something. We don't numb our emotions about suffering. We do the right thing. To our ability, to our capacity. Let's have a little kirtan.